Greetings and salutations. Welcome to REL headquarters here at Berkeley, California. I am the Director of Sales North America, Isaac Markowitz, and with me today, of course, is my friend and esteemed colleague, John Hunter, Chief Designer for REL, and of course, the face of the company for the last many years. We are so thrilled to spend time here together with you. We have people from Tasmania, Boston, Salt Lake City, Montreal, Connecticut, Atlanta. Thanks for coming from all over the world. It is such a privilege to be able to spend some time with you talking about the foundational series within REL Acoustics, which is the Serie S. John, I'd love to turn this over to you. There's so many questions about this. Like, what are we doing here today? What makes Serie S so special?
So to me, the very first products I ever designed were the original R series, which gradually over time continued to improve and at some point became Serie S's back in 2014. The reason this line was so important then and remains really kind of the touchstone of what we do is everything that we do actually cleaves off of the Serie S. If you look at how the line evolved from 2005 to present, we did the original R series. This was the 205, 305, and 505. And they really were the beginnings, the sort of seed germination of what REL became from that point on. They were nothing like they were now. They were much slower. They didn't play as loud, but the basic jewel inside of it was there already. As time went on, when we got to 2010 and we started to improve things, I started to get a better handle on what was going on both acoustically and mechanically in the drivers. And when we went about doing the first Serie S's that were launched in 2014, that's when we really got into the rhythm that we're in now, where driver mass, the moving mass, came down enormously in that first Serie S. So we got the mass down, we got the filter speed up, the amplifiers got better, bigger, faster, and we were really into a pathway that's led us to where we are now, where the 812s are just dominatingly loud and go extremely deep and very quick. And that takes us to where we are now, because in some ways, if you look back, we started with R. A year later, we brought out the Ts, and the Ts were really intended for people who needed something that would work with normal, if you will, everyday speakers. They were never designed to be the edge of the art, but gosh, we gave as much of that experience that we were delivering with the Rs as we could. And the same mission happens today. We have the S's, we have the TX's that deliver as much of that magic as we can. The fit, the finish is incredible. The sound quality is incredible. The adaptability to do both theater and music, all of these themes, kept combining and recombining and getting us to where we are now. And in that same way that we have off, right? So up here are the reference. In the middle, the sort of touchstone is S, and the TXs are below that, and the HTs are a dive off the deep end for theater bass, right? Theater bass is broadly understood to be loud and in many cases sort of thumpy. We wanted to show that you can keep the core virtues of being very fast, have tremendous impact, because when you have speed, it sort of doubles everything up. When you have deep bass, it plays profoundly loud, and it snaps. Somebody asked me, how does speed sound like in theater? I said, it's really simple. If you duck when you should, you're listening to a REL. If it just goes thump, it's a subwoofer. Right. And so in that way, and we'll come back to the classics later on if anybody has any questions about those, but in that way, the 812 is sort of the S, right? That's what we developed first in the line. We got everything right. We got the combination of mass down, bigger stroke to it. We got the reverse damping on the back of it, so it was extremely quiet. Quiet is something that's really important to subwoofers. It sounds funny, but it's really true. Quieting down the cone at exactly the moment it needs to be quiet is critical to both music and to really dynamic theater. And we got the 812, what we consider to be perfect, and then we went back down and did the 510. We made sure that the 510 was exactly the same quality, but it was really voiced for smaller speakers, smaller than the ones that the 812 supported, and rooms that were a little bit more modest. We don't ever want to overload a room and have it be the kind of overwhelming bass that frankly is sort of an unwelcome neighbor Once we'd done that, we went, well, we know how to do this. We'd done the 528 SE a number of years before, and so we brought out the Carbon Special that took elements of at the time, the G1, brought that driver in, massaged it a little bit for the smaller cabinet, got it down to working in a much smaller cabinet with the passive, and it just was magic in a bottle. I mean, just incredible, lightning in a bottle. There's something about that model that it just touches everybody who hears it. And then we'd already done a 212 SE, but the notion of a piece that had double active 12s, a down-firing passive, a rear-firing passive, it gives about, I don't know, 70-75% of the effect of a six-pack of a line array, where you get that majesty where the highs roll up and come up over your head. Really demanded the 212, and with the 212, what I really did there was solve the problems that we had identified in the 212 SE. The SX is tighter, tauter, the cabinet's narrower. We can get into the technicals of it, but you really need to very carefully control that back wave coming off the drivers and apportion how much of it goes to the rear and how much of it goes down. It's a strange thing, but we really nailed that with the SX. I mean, everybody who owned an SE and has heard an SX goes, oh gosh, you know, it's a huge improvement.
And you know that I was one of those people, right? You know, I owned REL for many years before joining you here, and the 212 SE, I'm glad you talked about majesty, right? Because I think that there's a lot of majesty in Serie S. And the 212, we have some questions about this. We can come back a little bit about why would you choose this over something else. But I'm amazed at the innovation, because I had an SE for a long time that I used in a very large room, and it was magical. It really was. Got my girlfriend at the time to say thank you, right? How many things can we buy that have people in our lives thanking us for bringing it in? And the SX was magical out of the box, and I was very impressed with its ability to do everything that I liked about the SE, plus a little more when it was still cold.
Right? It's cold out of the box.
Yeah.
Right?
What's your, so how do you make this series so magic? Why is this really such a special piece? Is it the high level and the resistorized network? Is it about the amplifiers? Is it the gestalt? How have you figured out how to make all of this so special?
Yeah, there's about 1,400 questions buried in that. The short version of it is, and I wrote about this in a blog, we learned something, believe it or not, in the original HTs, where we didn't even have a name for it at the time. We developed what came to be known as the perfect filters. And it's an analog filter. We don't use any DSP anywhere in any design that we produce, even like the big references that have digital tack switches. Those are just digital switches. It allows us very precise, for example, 1 hertz increments or 1 dB increments of gain. But there's nothing but pure analog filters in everything we do. It just sounds more correct to us. I don't actually hate DSP, although some people, you know, we've got guys, oh, that John already hates DSP. I don't. I think of DSP very much like CGI in a movie. Used properly and sparingly, it's a fabulous tool. It's also something that is addictive. If you're an engineer trying to achieve a visual result, meaning your idea of how to make the perfect subwoofer is to make it completely flat, right down to virtually DC. You think it's a wonderful, you know, toolbox. Unfortunately, that's actually not how physics works. It's not how sub-bass works in the real world. And so, you know, what I find is that you have to let the natural, organic result happen in a room. That's how we experience it when we're live. And when we play things back in that way, or if it's theater, if we play it back with the natural roll-offs that occur in real rooms and real spaces, it always strikes me as just much more natural and easier to just take in, like the magic of a movie or the majesty of a piece of music. So those perfect filters were responsible for elevating, in the Serie S, we only bring them in at 30 hertz. No. Now what they do is they essentially lift the output of the drivers, the driver box resonance, so that you get extended deep bass without overdriving them. It's really wonderful. And And then we've got these amazingly, it takes Justin and I, our chief engineer, takes us about 6 weeks just to set max levels and find out with real program material how far these can safely be pushed. And so again, this is not done digitally. You know, it's really easy to just sort of hard blunt cut off things. When you do that, it sounds exactly like I just described. Suddenly the thing stops getting louder and it just stops. That's really distractive. If you're a musician, you can imagine having somebody pull the AC cord on a bass player's amp. It will stop blowing up the driver in our big hurry. It will also stop the bass from happening. Like, what just happened to Andy's amp? Geez, right? It's unnatural. So we developed these wonderfully organic, I don't know how else to put it, limiters. They're soft, they're gentle. I suppose if you're a complete, numbskull, those guys all go buy somebody else's product, by the way. Yeah. But if you're somebody just heck bent on playing too loud, I suppose you could eventually overcome it and do some damage. But it's so far beyond the limits of most people's good common sense.
I think it's a really interesting point, right? How delicate it's not a brick wall. Right, you're not running out of gas. You know, I don't know how many of you guys out there feel the same as me, but I have a particular type of distortion. I played music for a long time. We've talked about this. Those of you out there who know me know I played. And for me, it's the compression, right? Whether it's mechanical compression in a driver, right? Or it's,
any sense of strain, any sense that we're coming to the end of the rope.
And it pulls me out of that experience tremendously. And I think that the amount of attention to detail that you've paid in the design of what that end of the road looks like on the product is one of the reasons so many of us have fallen in love with it.
Yeah, for me, I came to think of our limiters like bungee jumping. You know, if you were to hit the end of a normal rope, let's say you tied a rope around your waist, you go up to the tallest bridge, for reasons I can't explain, you decide to jump off of a perfectly good bridge and drop 200 feet. If it's a normal, stiff fiber rope, it could cut you in half. Right?
Like you're
going to die.
Yeah.
You're going to die. And the magic of bungee jumping, and I'm sure, I don't know anything about it, the technicals of it, but I'm quite sure that they do a heck of a lot of experimentation with weights and things to determine just how much
or stretch,
right? And it feels like that when we're working with, and we get it just right, you hear no compression. It's just that just before it smacks into the water, it comes back, right? When we get it right, it's magical. Yes, this is great. So, that's kind of it in a nutshell. I always start with the drivers. I have a dear friend who's an absolute genius named Eric, who does all the collaborative work on the drivers. All of our team, Eric, I've got Ryan on the industrial design side of things, just the most amazing CAD artist I've ever met. It's wildly talented people, and they've just been so kind to me over the years, helping achieve these dreams. And all of us that work on the team, we all kind of speak it, and I don't know how to describe it, a shorthand. I go through, I do all the sketches, for example, the first hand sketches, I send them down to Ryan, we talk for 2 or 3 hours. What's the vibe, what are we going for? I've detailed out things like handles and scoops and all those things, and he's gotten it. And then he goes and he does these incredible, usually 2D, but color and light correct renderings. And I get them back, and they're 90-95% correct on version 1. Holy shit, this is incredible. By version 2, it's perfect. And when we get to version 3, we're getting into the weeds now. We're talking about tiny little details that we're really, working on sculpting, like how far does the back panel need to emerge from the lacquered, cabinet surface, because we've got a really big transformer on this thing. So all of these things are part of it. I think that at the end, if we do something better than anyone else, I think it's the attention to detail is insane. I just don't know how to be more watchful, more careful, and attentive to the stuff that probably doesn't even matter to anybody but 2 or 3 people out there, and then they finally go, that's really cool.
Well, that's why we have so many dedicated and devoted fans, people who are joining us currently. And it sounds like, especially since I've been here and I've gotten to learn more about your design ethos and how has REL gone about making these particular speakers, is that this is where you put in the most effort. It seems to me like this is the foundational series. This is where the magic begins. And most of us who are starting the journey of owning a REL product or two probably should be looking at 510s, 812s, 212s, and carbon specials and seeing if we go up or down from there. What are your thoughts about that?
So I think one of the, we'll get to question and answer in just a little bit for sure. If we could see a picture of the 812, put that up on screen, that'd be really helpful.
And for
course,
those of you at home, we do have 812s
there's
here
3
as
of them
well.
here, and essentially a sort of a half inverted or third inverted 6-pack line array. So the 812, as I said, is where this generation of Serie S started. I don't doubt that someday if there's a successor to this, we'll do the same thing, and I'll start with whatever that thing's going to be called, right? It's so important to get that one right because it is easier to get. So, for example, the S510 to sound neat, tidy, very quick, very crisp, very delicate, right? It is only possible if we nail the 812. You can't create a 510 on its own. It has to be a slightly diminished but perfectly proportional response to the 812. And so when you listen to a 510, your first thought is not sort of sadness, oh, I missed this, because it's so perfectly trimmed and proportional. It's astounding. And the thing that's hard for people who own, for example, a T9X, even an SE, is how much freaking better a 510 is. It's on a completely different plane. It is one of those 3-note, now I get it. And I can say that because I've done that. We have a combination in England. We have a combination of sales reps who are great guys, work really hard, but they come at it more from a rep's perspective, and so they're thinking, all right, the T9X is quite good, right? And you bring them in, we do some training, you go, okay, and it is. It's a fantastic piece. I'm really proud of our TXs. And you go, okay, and they're nodding, going, yeah, that's the stuff. That's fantastic. Yeah, love that T9X. You go, okay. And you simply unplug. We've, of course, set up the 510. And you walk over and you plug that in, and you hit exactly the same piece of music, and everybody you see the look of shock on their face. They've never actually listened to it critically. It's like, okay, you're right, mate. That's a whole different level.
Totally different ball game. Yeah.
So and it's obvious that the carbon special is extensional, right? That we've gone, all right. So a little bit for you guys. I am really, really attuned to and very critical of what I describe as or call material signatures. Metal has a very distinctive signature. We do our very best to shut it up. It's even called an oil can resonance. If you were to take just the raw cone of an 812 or a 510, hold it in your hands and dimple it with your thumbs, it would make a strange kind right, from the old oil cans, right? Those of us who are of a certain age, our fathers had these oil cans that were used for like oiling hinges on doors and stuff. It was a round base. It came up like a sort of a tea kettle, and then there was this flexible, gooseneck kind of, and at the very end, usually it was like a little pointy thing, and you could get just a little drop of it. And the trick was, if you could get it turned over quickly enough, you just gave it a little quick, and it would put exactly 1 drop on the object you were close to. And so you can do that with a driver that is really stiff and rigid. The problem is it should never make that sound, right? So how do you quiet it down, both for that, but also for all the vibrational energy that's going out, it's radiating outward from the voice coil, radiating out 360 degrees outward, and then it strikes the edge of the surround, and some of that energy returns back down. And now you've got an argument going on in the surface of the cone itself, right? And to be able to quiet that down, we literally, as it almost looks like this, we have a series of carbon fiber fingers that are laminated to the back of the cone, and that thing is dead silent. It is really good at doing it. So we get the attack, which is what aluminium or any of the metals that you want to use gives you. You get that very snappy,
Yes.
fast attack. But what the carbon fiber, that it's invisible, you'd have to take the driver out and look, but it's there. What that does is it gives you the ability to shut that aluminum up so you don't have ringing that goes on. So when people hear our stuff, I've had other guys that are really smart in the industry go, I don't understand how you get aluminum to shut up like this. So just go, oh, well, that makes sense.
Just
It's
like all
carbon
the
fiber.
snappiness and the speed, we've talked about this,
Yeah.
customers have talked about it, because these, the 510s, the 812s, these things have a snap, a drive, a speed, an instantaneous response to music that is, well, really musical. It sounds a lot like real life, but it doesn't ring. Right, and I know that I've listened to other products. Right, I've had personal experience with stuff that, kind of to your point, doesn't shut up. You can kind of hear it after the note ends. You can hear it after the gunshot. There's a little ring. Right, there's this tail, if you will, that isn't natural, that I don't hear in these at all. And I think we've had enough experience setting these up together to have some really extraordinary experiences, including recently.
We say that. We just got back from New Jersey where we worked with a wonderful high-end reviewer and set up a line array of S510s in a beautiful room, an absolutely beautiful room using fantastic speakers. He's fortunate enough to own a pair of Rockport Atria 2s,
Really beautiful.
which is a really special speaker. And boy, the sound in that room was stunning.
Enough to get a couple of us giggling. I think towards the end of it, it was really, really, really exciting.
Yeah, really neat stuff. So those are some of the larger themes. We get a lot of questions, and we're happy to answer them. Get a lot of questions. What is the thing with stereo pairs? And it's a really good place to start. So if you don't mind, let me just sort of start with some of the obvious, and then we can pile into actual Q&A. I want to answer all of your questions
for just a moment,
as
John,
possible.
to chat to the guys. This would be a great time as John starts to talk about this. If you have additional questions, throw them into the chat. Right, we have people in this room, a whole bunch of lovely people you can't see, unfortunately, who are making this make it look easy for us. Pile in those questions. We're going to do our best to answer all of them. If we can't get to all of them, don't think that we don't care. All of this is going to, all of the questions in here will be addressed at some point. Contact us at rel.net. So keep these questions coming while John talks about why stereo pairs.
Yeah, we probably have 6 or 8 people that somewhere in the next probably 48 hours, we will get every question possible answered in detail and in depth. And if it's something that is so long that would require a long rambling essay, include your phone number,
we can give you
and
a call.
we'll call you back. So we're really all about transparency and trying to help people make good decisions for themselves. And we're aware that there's a Serie S special happening in North America right now, and so particularly for those people, before stocks and inventories start to run out, we want to get those questions answered so you can make coherent decisions. The stereo pair is one of those demos, and we just did this down 2 weeks ago in Southern California again. If you've not heard it, it is hard to believe that it is almost as big a difference as the difference you heard if you own a REL when you inserted a REL into your system. And it's troubling because you don't think that that's doable. It's so often in audio, it's anything but a linear extension, right? If you have one of something, if you have a 100-watt amp and you buy a 200-watt amp, it doesn't play twice as loud, right? You know that. Power, of course, is logarithmic, so it plays about 15-20% louder. And similarly, often if you spend a certain amount, I'm going to pick a number. If you spend $5,000 on something, on a whole system, and you spend $10,000, it's not double the goodness. It will be better in a number of ways, but you don't go, wow, let's go through it.
Yeah,
plays twice as loud, goes right there.
Exactly.
And a stereo pair of RELs does stuff that I still find almost troubling. It's so dramatic. So a stereo pair set up properly, and it's not very hard to do. First of all, it utterly spreads the sound stage.
Yes.
We're so used to sound stages that are either V-shaped or U-shaped. What do I mean by that? Up here, is, and I'll do it in reverse, which I think will be easier for you guys to understand. So here's two speakers, and what you wind up with as you get further into, spatially, into the depth of the soundstage, what you wind up is the soundstage typically narrows to the point, here's the drummer back here, and the drums and anything that is not in the foreground, that isn't stage front, is increasingly narrowed down almost to a V-shaped point. Better systems with better dispersion things, you'll get more of a U-shaped distribution. It still truncates, but it's not quite as dramatic as a small, less talented system. And when you get stereo pairs of RELs, it takes that entire thing, and all of a sudden, for the first time, you realize it actually was a rectangular soundstage. It sounds really silly and very obvious. You're going, okay, how many years have I been listening to music this way?
Right.
And it has the same benefits, by the way, for theater. So if you're a theater guy, all of this stuff applies to both music and theater. And it's just a sidebar. I hate the artificial schism that exists in our industry, which serves somebody's needs, but I don't think it's a single customer's, of treating music and theater bass as two completely different devices. They're not. If something sounds goofy in music, I can guarantee you that once you hear its signature and you start to identify what it is, it's going to be not good in theater. It's going to really be the kind of thing that you can't get through a 2-hour movie because it's sort of annoying. But that's what the second one does. And you know, all I can do is, as I'm saying this, I'm thinking back to recent reactions, facial expressions on people who are just looking at you and going, oh my gosh, that's crazy. Because they haven't, these are people who work in stores, they haven't done it recently, and we're there to remind them. So yeah, it's an enormously important thing. It spreads sounds out into the correct locations and scale, and then adds this cushion of air and focus and clarity that is remarkable.
You know, because these things add, and you hear me say this all the time, right? Really great subwoofers like from REL Acoustics, they're about space. They're not about bass. And having the opportunity to show people that, and I encourage you to try this at home with material that they would never expect. Harmonicas, a slide guitar, right? Pianos and things like that. It's really special when you guys get into stereo subwoofers for the very first time, and I encourage you, go meet with one of your dealers. Find somebody local who can show you this in real time. I am blown away at how much more nuance I get in the performance.
Yeah.
You talk about the space, and I think that's very accurate. But for me, the foundation of truly world-class, if you guys want to know where Isaac believes the beginning of world-class starts in a hi-fi system, it's with 2 full-range channels, which we can't do with nominal speakers. We really need subwoofers in order to complete what the main speaker is doing. And I want you guys to try this at home. Go try this with one of your dealers. Find a performance that you know really well. And don't just focus on the audiophile stuff, which is easy for us to do as audiophiles. That's why we're here together. But listen to how they perform. Listen to the structure of the pads of their fingers on the guitar. Listen to the intonation of a pianist and their fingers. I think they're going to be shocked right at what they can hear with this. I mean, what's your experience been like with the performative differences?
Oh, yeah, it's not even close. There's something I want to just throw this in there. This is a little bit more engineering for those of you who are sort of more quantitatively oriented. I have I have set up and dialed in systems and voiced RELs into rooms that had 8 to 9 dB differences between left channel and right channel. I'm talking about specifically in the bass. I just worked in one 2.5 weeks ago, and it is extraordinary because one of the things that great subwoofers can do is they can help fix the room. Now, I know that room tuning is a really popular term, which drives me freaking crazy because there's absolutely no tuning of the room going on at all. Let's be really candid. When you put a $4 microphone down and hit go on a laptop or whatever the mechanism is for triggering this, you are adjusting gain, you are adjusting EQ, and maybe delay. Right? But you're playing with the playback system's capabilities, not your room. when you put, say, a pair of stereo RELs properly into a room with a pair of good speakers that are voiced properly, and again, all of this applies to theater. So when I say 2 speakers, it's the easiest, simplest version of theater, right? Would be, say, 2.1. We can take that and extrapolate it from there. You will find there may be absolutely no correlation between the settings of gain and crossover on the left channel versus the right channel. I worked in a showroom, this was 4 or 5 years ago, with a line array of S510s, the smaller little brother to us. There was a 13-click gain difference between the right channel, which was suffering, and the left channel, which was up against, not up against, but close to a foundational wall. 13 clicks? Oh my God, we're talking like 20 dB differential, left channel to right channel. It was crazy.
Yep.
So I say that and share that only because that's a room problem.
Right.
We are fixing a room problem. And the last time I checked, that's actually room tuning.
So I believe what you're saying is this is actually active room acoustics.
Right. I mean, what we're doing is the room is taking away, right? Rooms add peak and they detract energy, particularly in the bass, the detraction. And what we're able to finally do on this is correct the room such that you're finally able to hear the speakers, because the speakers' dynamics are being crushed by the room.
Right.
So you finally fix that. It's like, oh, that's what my $25,000 speakers are supposed to sound like.
This is interesting. I might be jumping ahead a little bit, but this seems like a perfect segue because we were just talking about going to reviewers and setting up a 6-pack of 510s. And one of the things...
Jasmine, do you mind putting up an image of a 6-pack for me? Thank you. Here's a line array.
And we were just talking about the room acoustics and how the room could crush the speaker. And one of the things you and I noticed as we were dialing in this particular system, right, is that certain frequencies sounded crazy loud when we didn't have the subwoofer on. Right. You remember this?
Yeah,
and
very
then
peaky.
Very peaky. It was boomy. John, you and I were like listening to each thing until you were like, "Hey Isaac, how many clicks of gain do we have?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's none. It's not on." So we start clicking them up one by one, and all of a sudden the boom and the bass is reduced. There's more linearity.
That's crazy.
So this is one of those things, guys and gals, I cannot stress enough. You know, a lot of what we feel like intuitively works doesn't always. And this was a case of where more was less.
Yeah.
By putting in more woofers, by creating the line array, and by being able to individually tune what each one of these drivers did in the room, we were able to actually fix room acoustics that had been, you know, causing some issues. So it's one of the things about line arrays that, you know, to me, when I first started selling this stuff, you know, 12 years ago, when I started bringing it into my home, it was a revelation. And so
that's crazy.
I know one of the questions that we got is, and we kind of this perfect segue from 1 to 2. Well, why a line array? This feels like a good time to kind of talk a little bit about why doing that.
So, and I had it in mind from experiments I did way back in the mid-'80s. I was fortunate enough to work with a really smart store owner. And the crew that went through that place is utterly remarkable. Like, you know, we had Garth Lear.
Oh, sure, okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So we had Garth working there. We had Sterling Trail working there. We had probably 4 or 5 guys that went on to do serious things in the industry, all working in a 1,200 square foot retail shop.
Competing with each other every day.
Not even. We didn't work on commission. It was really interesting. It wasn't about competition in that sense. It was about giving the best work for the customer. We had so many unique policies. We had our own 4-year parts and labor warranty that we conferred. Because if we said it was not going to break, it was not going to break, because we had gone through it with a fine-tooth comb and said, wow, I was talking to you about those Kyocera receivers earlier, right?
Same place got it, yeah.
Holy God, those things were overbuilt. Beautiful. They're still running today, 45 years later.
Gotta love point-to-point wiring and all the good stuff of how we don't make
No, they had discrete MOSFET outputs, and they had a freaking radiator. They literally had a heat pump that kept those MOSFETs from running away, which back then was a really big deal.
Yeah, that was unusual.
Yeah, so this is the kind of stuff we got into. and we guaranteed a 48-hour turnaround time, so it better not break.
Right.
Which is kind of what RELs are, right? You would, I have to ask Isaac here to expand on it, because when he came through his interview process a few months ago, he was shown a very, very small pile of parts on a lone shelf. Maybe a couple of amp panels, a driver, and a passive or something. Yeah. And so you take it from here, because he asked Jacob, what are those?
Yeah, you can't see Jacob, but he's holding it down for us in the back of the room. Thanks very much. And you know, I'm an inquisitive guy. Any of you who know me know this is true. And so I start picking things up, and I'm like, okay, well, this is interesting. I can see a little defect here, or something's going on. I'm so like, hey, what's up with this? And Jacob says to me, well, these are all the things that have failed. And I go, oh, great. Like, so like on the last shipment, or like what, for the last couple of months? He goes, no, these are the things that have failed over a protracted period of time. And I start looking at this. I'm like, but that's not possible. You have 8 things here. No, it was 6. It was a couple of amp boards, right? It was a passive and a driver.
And if I recall, it was like over 5 months roughly.
Yeah, it was about 5 or 6 months, I think, is what Jacob was telling me. Guys, I have done retail. I was a retail salesperson, a retail manager. I opened a big box store. I have worked for several manufacturers, and I can tell you this. That kind of failure rate at a fraction of 1% for devices that are active, amplifiers, inputs, drivers, moving parts, is unheard of. I've worked with companies that have no moving parts in their products.
They can't pull that out.
And that failure rate is difficult for companies that don't have moving parts. This was really extraordinary. And during the interview process was one of the things that honestly really sold the company. I'd always wanted to work for you, but really helped to sell REL. I'd owned REL. I'd had number 32s. I'd had the 212 SE, and to be able to see with my own eyes how few of these things break over time was really a testament to the amount of work that you put into designing these.
Yeah, well, it's a work of a body of thousands of people, right? Because our factories have bought into our sense of what, you know, functional industrial perfection is. Mm-hmm. And they do things for us that I am quite certain they do for nobody else. It's extraordinary how once you set the standards up here, good people like that.
Yeah, they enjoy it. You challenge them.
They get it, right? Yeah. They go, oh, we can't get away with that. Like that 2%, 5% defective rate, that's not going to work here. So it's neat. Some of you guys who know me know this. My mother was Japanese, and my father was Swiss German, and so between the two, I didn't have a shot.
I was like, you weren't a perfectionist. It was.
So it's got to be mechanically perfect, and from the Japanese side, it can never, ever, ever break.
Yeah.
Other than that, so you put those two things together, I was completely screwed. I have distinct memories of watching the internal surfaces of the rear bumper of one of my dad's cars, mm-hmm. because he said anybody can wash the chrome. That's obvious. Be better.
Be better. Yeah, I have a much deeper appreciation for who you are today and your personality base.
It all makes so much more sense
on
now.
That.
Anyway, so the line arrays.
Yeah.
So this goes back to experimenting I did. It was a really neat and very exploratory time for me. We were killing it. We were selling tons of high-end turntables and great speakers and things. And unusually, the owner, Doug Blackwell, always had good subwoofers in, which was really unusual in the 1980s. Mm-hmm. So I got a chance to a lot of times back then, you're 19, 20, 21 years old, you're experimenting, you're willing to stay after hours, and some of us did. And I remember stacking subwoofers just for the heck of it to find out what it did. And I started to hear things I'd never heard before. Unfortunately, at the time, we only had 2 that were identical sized, so mm-hmm. we couldn't do 3. But I started to hear this effortless dynamics and things that I was like, wow, this is remarkable. And I'm a retail sales manager working in a small store in Berkeley, so you couldn't call these companies up and go, I've got an idea. Good thing I didn't.
Right.
But when we did the first reference model, the G1, I developed that from the beginning. Normally when we do our sampling, our prototyping process, we'll get one in and we'll work on it and get it perfect. And then as we evolve it, we'll get additional samples in that are informed by the tests and exploration we've done. With the G1s, when we went to do final sampling, I ordered 6 identical cabinets, and they kind of, I think, wanted to know why.
Like, this seems like an
And
excessive.
I said,
yeah.
just do it, and they did, and they were all wrong. No, 100%. They cut. There was an error in the drawings, and so they cut the driver openings the wrong dimension.
Oh no.
And poor Justin had to take a hand router and open them up by hand with a 30,000 RPM.
Well, now I know why he is such an invaluable ally to us here.
That's one of about 60 reasons. So it wasn't perfect, but they held, they were airtight, they worked fine. You couldn't see it from more than a foot away. Funny. And got to tell you a funny story. I'll shut up. But the original amplifiers, these 600 watt big monoblocks, right? The inrush of current when you first turn a big amp like that on can be tremendous. Mm-hmm. And our engineer at the time, this was done by an engineer other than Justin, decided that there was something that the amp liked about that massive inrush of current, and it got bad. I finally said, Bill, we got to measure this because this isn't right. I was having to plug things in and then sequentially, you get one on, and then you get it fully charged up, and then you'd have to unplug it, plug the next one in. Right?
Yeah.
Oh my God! So it's hilarious. 85 amps of inrush current is what we finally measured.
Guys, that's a lot of amps.
That's a lot of amps.
That's a lot of amps.
Yeah. Anyway, it's worth a chuckle, but yeah. So we developed the first one, got it right, and then of course developed 5 more amplifiers to duplicate that and started experimenting with it. And the beauty of a line array is that it unlocks a whole unspoken question we've all been grappling with in high end for decades. When I read reviews written by very smart, very bright writers that are far better writers than I will ever be, audio reviewers who use the term three-dimensional, it generally is used in a context that makes it about depth of image.
Yes, yes.
Okay, that's not a breakthrough. I'm gonna assign this to the British LS35A as the point at which, incontrovertibly, any decently set up pair of LS35As, these are little 5 1/4 inch two-ways,
Beautiful little
that
monitors. Yeah.
are absolutely magical. But from that moment on, we had right to left, and we had depth.
Yep.
Conversation over. So that isn't the third dimension.
I believe there's a height aspect to 3 dimensions. I think you need that still. Yeah.
Right, and those of you who are audiophiles, you've seen big Wilsons. They're 750 pounds a piece. They're 7.5 feet. What is that? I don't know, 2.5 meters or something. They're huge, and those also have it. But they also have it at at prices of $130,000 on up to $770,000 or something.
If you can spend it, great. But I can't. I'm not at that level.
Right, and there is something to understanding that the room and the way we work with the room is really critical. So what a line array really gives you, and Isaac, you alluded to the fact that you have control over all 3 of them.
Yes.
For both crossover, phase, gain, all those things have to be dialed in. The phase is easy. It's going to be either 0 or 180, and I'll get into that. Somebody will probably ask, well, why don't you guys do rotary controls? Have you ever tried setting phase with a rotary control?
I actually have.
That waylays madness. It's a difficult enough thing to do in some rooms with just a 0 and 180 switch. It's a nightmare if you're trying to guess as you're taking time to rotate this thing back and forth. With impulses and deep bass. You can do it with steady state test tones. That is not music. That is not an explosion. So that mechanism does not work. So in short, what a line array gives you is deep, profound, floor-crawling bass from the bottom one. The middle one gives you the attack, the mid-bass attack of things like a really fast, well-played kick drum, right? Where the impact is, boom, it hits you. You feel it in your chest. And then this one, nobody I've ever talked to can ever actually summon up the words to describe what this does. This is all of the high-frequency harmonic extension that starts way, way, way down here, 20 hertz or even below, and rises 10 octaves to the air in the top of a concert hall. Why it does it and how it does it, go ask some theoretical physicist. It's beyond me. All I can tell you is we can achieve it every time. And when you hear it for the first time, our friend Matt, the reviewer,
Yes.
he was immediately, he's like, oh my gosh, it's like the brass instruments glisten. How does that do that, right?
Right, it's the color of the cymbals. Anything that was metal that was at a certain height, he's like, I can see the color of the brass.
It's crazy. So that is the simple, short explanation of it. Over the last decade, we've been doing this now since, at least in prototyping, 2009. But, we released the G1 in late 2010, so 14, 15 years.
I'd love to share a story actually about my first experience with the line array, if I may. In fact, I met you, if you remember this, right about the same time, would have been somewhere around 2013, 2014-ish. Had this very special client when I was still at Magnolia Best Buy who ended up buying a $1.3 million stereo through Best Buy, and this is where I got to know you for the first time and became dear friends with one of your proteges, David Ellington, who really sold me this idea. He's like, listen, you have this amazing customer, he really trusts you, and I need you to trust me. You sold a pair of G1 Mark IIs, love the subwoofer, I sold so many of those when I was still a sales guy, and he's like, I need you to sell 2 more. And I was like, I don't understand. What do you mean sell 2 more subwoofers? This is 4 subwoofers. You're crazy. He goes, no, you got to trust me. You need to sell the next pair. And I did. And hear me when I say it was better, but it wasn't like the first subwoofer or the stereo pair, which is magic. And I had this experience. It was more impact. It was more visceral, more gut punch. Yeah. It was better, but I wasn't sure that it was totally special. And Ellington says to me, but now you have to sell the last pair. And I'm like, come on, man, I don't understand. Like, this thing is so crazy. He goes, trust me, Isaac, you need to trust me. You need to trust John, right? You've come through this lineage. You need to have this experience. And I said to him, but listen, I've listened to Woofer Towers before. Arnie Nudell, right, of Infinity. I mean, great stuff, right? I've listened to a lot of cool stuff over the course of my life. And I'd heard big Woofer Towers. So I'm like, I know what this does. It's not. What's the difference? Yeah. And he says, Isaac, just do your job, right? Go in there and sell the last pair, and I did. And I will never forget. I will never forget to this day. So again, one of the main reasons I wanted to come work for you is I use the word a lot because I have no better explanation. It was magic. There was this moment when we set up those last 2 woofers on the top where everything else about the system, Sonus Faber Aidas, bi-amped audio research Ref 750s, guys, this system was unbelievable.
Unreal.
And it was like it was no longer a stereo. Yeah. People asked me, Isaac, what was it like to go listen to this? And I struggled for so long, and I finally said, it's like, if you guys know the big oceans, right, and all these abyssal plains, right, miles deep, billions of pounds of pressure. And that's what it was like. It was to be a grain of sand at the bottom of the ocean, suffused with pressure that was so natural and so lifelike, and it's what drove me to get to here. It's what drove me to build the system that I have today. So, guys, this is, when you hear this for the first time, it will change your life. It is. I'm not exaggerating. It is a thing that you have to.
That was a profound description. Mine is simpler and pulled from sort of pop culture. I remember being in the Westwood Theater in Westwood, California, down by UCLA. And I was, during Christmas break, my girlfriend and I went to see a movie that I forget what it even was. and they showed the trailer for Star Wars, which was a long trailer. Uh, it was a movie, near as I can tell, right? Because it was so amazing. But to me, it's like the first time that Han Solo in the Millennium Falcon hits the button for the jump, and the entire starfield just turns into rays. That's what it hit me like the first time I ever experienced one that was really perfectly balanced. One, wow, this is a whole different experience. Listen, enough of us. We are here for you. We are here to answer questions. Start shooting them.
Yeah, so, go ahead, yeah.
Sure, yeah. So I guess before you guys kind of talk about the sonic character and differences between the different Serie S models, what's the difference that you hear when you get to Serie S, for example, going from a T9X to an S510?
Ooh.
Yeah, it's one of our most frequent questions. It's a really good one. It is profound. It is everything. So as good as the 9X is, and it's a really nicely balanced piece, when you move, if your speakers are correct, I want to be really careful. We are not in the business of trying to upsell you randomly from 9Xs to 510s because, I don't know, it's whatever, $1,000 more or something. If your speakers are good enough, and for us, that is the first dividing line. When we're trying to decide how to help you make the right product decision, it's about speed of the main speakers. So we're assuming now that you've got speakers, the Bowers and Wilkins line, something like 702s. Any of the bigger speakers above 5,000, 10,000 in that range tend to be faster than the things between 1,000 and say 4,000. The speed is the very first determinant, and then you start getting into scaling to match and not let down the scale of the speaker. So if the speaker is capable of a really big sound field, and we sell it, for example, a 510, when an 812 or a carbon special is appropriate, or even 212SXs, which are massive sounding, we've done our job incorrectly. So what do you hear? It plays enormously louder. Enormously louder. It goes substantially deeper. Understand that in subwoofers, 3 hertz is a product frontier. Right, so people go, oh, well, this one's it goes down to 26 hertz. That one only says 23.
That's huge.
Whole different category.
Huge.
That's a whole different category. That's like in cars, somebody going, my Porsche Panamera gets to 60 in 5.3 seconds. Okay, and a Turbo S is only three seconds quicker.
Yeah, only 3 seconds.
Okay, it's a completely different category. So it's faster, it's more impactful, it's deeper, it produces a much bigger sound than the 9X. That's the jumping off point. And then within S, it's really about scaling and matching speed. Again, when you get up to carbon specials, they're significantly faster than the 812, and they are essentially signatureless. Carbon special is the only fibrous material I know of that has the capacity to not impart a mechanical signature.
We were talking about how explosively dynamic and fun. I cannot stress enough, capital F, fun. Yeah. The carbon special is, guys, if you have the space and budget allows, and by the way, allow me to share very briefly, guys, the special going on right now for these
Great.
are unbelievable. Okay, carbon specials, I believe, are $500 off of MSRP right now.
And apologies to our friend the Tasmanian Devil.
Yeah, right.
Sorry, mate.
These prices, but
this is North America only.
Right. So this is the best opportunity for you to get started with this for the first time. If you have 510s, 812s, a carbon special, this is a great time to buy your second one. If you have 2, this is the time to buy 2 more. But guys, go to your local dealers. If you have the opportunity, I cannot stress how fun that particular model is, and you need to hear it. The 212 is another one. You've heard me brag on that a little bit. I think it's a specialty model. One of the questions that we got is, why would I do a 212 or a pair of 212s over 2 or 4 812s? And I thought that was one of the best questions that have come in so far. So what would you describe in the differences between a 212 SX versus an 812, and why would I want to do 4 of these or 2 of these? What do you think the plan is there in that system and for that customer?
I think the 212 is the most perfect device I've ever heard for somebody without wanting to spend tens and tens of thousands of dollars, taking sub-bass and implementing it into a huge system, it is virtually limitless, meaning that it is first quick enough and subtle enough to not be overbearing and just intrusive and obnoxious. It is very quick, very pistonic. It's got great enunciation and great extension, and there is this effortless quality. It was the most, and this is before we started using line arrays in this room, but it was the most even measurements we ever got in this room was when we got to the 212SXs. It's not unusual for rooms to have 15 dB difference from one spot in the room to another. We couldn't generate more than 5 dB of offset difference anywhere in the room.
It's smooth.
That is really remarkable. It will play as loud as your hearing wants it to. You should not want to listen to it louder than this can, because you're going to be damaging your hearing. It is very loud. So it means that you can have big theater, you can have great fun in 2-channel, and not have to worry about the fact that somehow it's tilted too far to this or that, and it's just uniform and gives you, like I said, about 70% of the effect of a line array.
Right, it's basically like a baby line array. And for those of you out there, because again, a lot
and I'll say, I'm sorry, just this. It is, if that's all you have height room, I mean, we've all got rooms that you've got limitations. It can't be this, it can't be that. It is better than 2 of the 812s, because it's a whole tuned system. We didn't design these line arrays to be 2s. Will they do things? Yeah. I lived with my line array, and I built it progressively like a customer would. So I lived for a week and a half with just the pair and went, wow, this is really good. Then I added the second pair, and it did some amazing things. Some of you guys have been up to my home. The kitchen's a good 45 feet away, around a corner, make another right-hand turn. And when I put the second one in, the next morning I got up and I was making coffee. And the little container we hold our ground coffee in to make it is in the back corner from there. And it was playing very softly, the system was. And all of a sudden, the cabinets in front of me started rattling. I had never had this experience in my own home before. And so what the 4-pack, if you will, does incontrovertibly is room drive. It does it, right? But it's not fully balanced. As you said, with your experience of the first time you ever heard a line array, you get that third one up and you go, oh my goodness, this is a whole different thing, right?
Why I did this.
And so this is a very simple way of getting to that. The 212SX, I'm sorry it took too long to go back to that one, but the 212SX, because it has that rear firing passive and the down firing kind of acts like this one. The down firing gives you that floor crawl, that ripple where you feel stuff coming up through the soles of your feet, right? The 212s on the front are the impact. That's the mid-bass, the attack, the enunciation, everything. And then the one on the rear, especially if you can get it at all firing towards a corner, it hits the corner and it literally rolls up over the ceiling and comes back down to your listening position. It's really cool.
I think that's why both John and I recommend, if you don't have the room to do the third one, please get the 212s. These
really
things
happy.
are so powerful, they are so dynamic, and you've heard me use this word fineness, right? So fineness for me is that kind of last iota of quality where it's not resolution anymore, it's the nuance of stuff that's real.
Yeah.
You'd be shocked at how much fineness exists in the 212. And as a final note, because a lot of people want to know, well, how do we pair these and what's appropriate? I use one of these with a pair of Wilsons at home, and it is mind-boggling. We have customers who have a pair of these with huge focal utopias, right? And they're amazing. So this, for me, is the 212 is one of those products that it hits a lot of things. It's relatively simple to set up. Single or stereo pair is magic, and you have a broad range of loudspeakers you can work with it. So if you have any questions about this, like reach out to us, reach out to your dealers. Contact us at rel.net is one of the best assets that you have. So
You got to have another question.
yeah.
Sure, yeah.
Let's punch through these a little quicker. I'm being too long-winded. Go ahead.
Sure, yeah. So the Serie S subs, of course, come with a grill to protect the front-firing driver. When you're setting up a system, do you have a preference on the grill? And does it impact the performance of the sub in any way?
So, sure, you can take this one or I can take this one. Go ahead.
So this is a great question. Depending upon which model we're looking at, yes and no, right? If you're talking about reference where you have strings, not so much because we have the ability to push air through that. If you're talking about specifically the Serie S that we have here, there is definitely a difference. I would personally tell you that using the grill is largely an aesthetic choice for you in the room. You think that that's what makes the most sense. Maybe you even have animals, right? You have kids.
Right.
You have something that allows these drivers to not just be exposed, but to be exposed to some damage. You should go ahead and use the grill. The performance difference is modest, but it's something. There is an effect that having all of this fabric in front of the driver is going to make.
And I just want to follow up on something, a nuance in the question that Jacob asked, which is when we're setting it up, which do I do? I always take the grills off for setup. And the reason is because I want to hear all the clarity, all the attack. It helps me be a better tuner, if that makes any sense. At the end of it, if we decide to put the grills on or not, it's immaterial. Now they've been perfectly dialed in. So I want the last iota of clarity and delicacy I can squeeze out, because those are the cues that let me get it to be perfect or simply very, very good.
And at the end of the day, whether you choose to put the grill on at the end, as long as it's been set up right, it's this much, right? So is there something? Yes, objectively, I need to say that there is. Is it going to change your enjoyment of the system? Not at all.
All right. What else you got?
Sure, yeah. When dialing in the crossover on a subwoofer, is there a good starting point that you start with? And what are you really listening for when you adjust the crossover on a sub?
That's a great question.
It's one of the best so far, yeah.
So how would I describe this? There's a sequence of steps.
Right.
And I think I'm gonna give an answer for somebody who's not super experienced doing this. First of all, I would actually, this is gonna sound crazy, I would start with the crossover up at about the 9 o'clock setting, 9 to 10 o'clock. That's probably somewhere around 10 or 11 clicks off the bottom. We use the click count on the precision pots to give you a really precise setting at the end. But I would start there and bring the gain up slowly. And the first thing I always do is a phase check. I listen to 0 and 180, 0 and 180, and the first few times you do it, it may take you 5 or 6 times. You may not trust your ears. You may be standing in a point that's awkward. If you're standing by the speaker while doing this, you can get fooled by the output from the speaker. So you really want to check it from your listening position. But it's really important that you get that phase set correctly. Then you take it all the way back down. The crossover goes all the way down to 0. Bring the gain up and start increasing the crossover a click at a time. And you're going to stop at the point where it becomes noticeably too boomy, right? It'll happen in the, you'll be bringing it up, and it varies by speaker, by room, so there's no way to know, but I'm going to use an imaginary number. You're bringing it up click by click by click, somewhere around 11 clicks. You're starting to wonder, is that right? Is it not right? Right? You keep going, maybe you're at 14 or 15 clicks up now, and you suddenly go, oh, that's definitely not right. That is really fat.
Yes.
That's too much. So you take it back down to the 11 that you knew it was pretty good at, and you bring it up. And there is a point, and what I listen for is if it's 1 click too low in crossover, there'll be a thinner kind of hard metallic edge to certain transients. Even if it's a bass transient, we use track 4 on Sneakers, the soundtrack to Sneakers. And it's a slight disembodied, it doesn't quite connect with the main speaker, and you can hear it. It's a little hollow sounding. You bring it up 1 click, and you get this fullness without it being fat. You bring it up 2 clicks, and you're into the beginnings of Fatland. That's the best way I can explain it to you. And it may take you 15, 20 minutes to satisfy your curiosity at the beginning. It won't happen instantly. Along with that goes a need to tow a subwoofer into the listening position. It's really critical. I see a lot of people in a lot of shots of customers' homes where the RELs or any subwoofer they're using are
Flat,
completely parallel with the side walls and completely parallel with the front wall. And I can assure you, you're getting about maybe 60% of what the product can develop.
You know, John, one of the things that you just said that I'll touch on very briefly for those folks at home that I really like is you said, you know, X number of clicks, okay, now it's a little thin, then X plus so many, right now it's too fat. Effectively, what we're doing is giving a range, right? Practice with this. The whole point of this is that this is fun, right? I think we got into this because we wanted to mess around. You know, I love setting up speakers. I love setting up subwoofers, and so play with it. Don't think of this as a homework assignment, and if you don't get it right, then you can't have maximum enjoyment. Like, I think going through the process of figuring out where things are is fun. So think about what John said is here's too little, here's too much, and then enjoy the process of finding what the middle is, because once you've done that and you kind of just get it into your head, you're going to be shocked at how easy it is on subsequent times. You'll go to your buddy's house and you'll be a hero.
And I apologize, I didn't tell you what to listen for on phase. 0 or 180, 0 or 180, you're clicking back and forth. You have to do it somewhat in time with the music. Don't just randomly do it. And you're listening for which setting is louder. Why? Because when you're only using 0 and 180 and you're using bass impulses like we do in sneakers, what you're hearing is the impulse response where the subwoofer and the speaker are excurting at the same moment. When the speaker is going out and the sub is going out, it will be louder. When the subwoofer is going backwards as the speaker is trying to go forward, it's negating the effect of the speaker. That's why that's quieter. So it's very simple, but not instantly obvious at the beginning. So don't think if you start doing this, I'm not hearing everything perfectly. Relax, it'll come to you. And go up to the listening position and listen for that. Any others?
Sure. So REL subwoofers, a lot of them feature a passive radiator in addition to the active driver. How does that work, and why do we use a passive radiator on our subwoofers?
Definitely a John question. Definitely for the designer.
I'm not gonna get it. So fundamentally, you have to understand. I freaking hated passives when I started this journey. I'm not gonna point any fingers at anybody, but most people don't understand how a passive should work. And if you follow the traditional math, you will wind up with something that sounds incredibly boomy and obnoxious, because they always key the resonant frequency of the passive and the speaker to be identical. Ought not to be how it's done. I'm not going to get into the tricks that we do, but I will tell you this. I use a passive much more like a pressure relief valve. When it's not playing particularly loud or deep, passive does almost nothing. When you start really energizing the cabinet, there comes a point where in a perfect world the cabinet would simply get bigger. It would allow, you know, the resonant frequency to be suppressed a little bit by the greater volume. And so ours are quite a bit stiffer than a typical one. The construction of them is enormously stiff. The actual material itself, it's a perfect piston that really comes alive at low frequencies and high volume.
I think we can even see that on the screen right now. You can see that the passive on the bottom of these units is designed differently. It uses a different material. It has a different shape. Sounds to me like you don't simply take one solution and sticky it all over everything.
That's exactly right. Even passives that look identical, we tune them specifically to the application. So a 510 passive is different than an 812 passive, is different than the one that's used in the bottom of a 212SX. It's just necessary. But for those of you who, like myself, hated passives, these sound nothing like any passive I've ever heard.
Sounds to me like an enormous sealed box, honestly. There's a speed, there's a snap, there's a tunefulness, right, that I think typically, I mean, in my experience, eludes ported subwoofers. You know, so to me, they're just very, very tuneful, very like real music.
And adaptable. Go ahead, sir.
Sure. So if a customer has a stereo pair of subwoofers and is considering a line array, REL suggests stacking 3 on each side for a total of 6. What if they only have the budget to do 2 on each side?
So great question. By the way, at the opposite end of the income spectrum, which is most of us, You know, we have a number of people doing what we euphemistically refer to as 10 packs, in which there are stacked five aside. And this is for very large rooms, very tall ceilings, and very, very large speakers that can handle it. I think I alluded to it earlier. We have nothing against 4-packs. 4-packs, as I said in my own personal experience at home, have room drive that's incredible. It is an immediate and audible upgrade from a stereo pair. The third one, however, is where all the magic happens, where all the harmonic detail emerges. So is a 4-pack better than a 2-pack? It absolutely is, especially if you have big speakers and big rooms, right? Absolutely, instantly you'll hear the scale, the effortlessness, all those things immediately emerge. And the reason that we use 3 is twofold, and I think you were going to probably allude to this, Isaac. So the reason I finally realized, it took me about 6 months to a year of tuning these things actively with different systems and learning it before I felt comfortable, you know, directing others and teaching others how to use these. You need a focal point for a system.
Yep.
When you have 2, either the top one is leading or the bottom one is leading, and it's virtually impossible to get them pistonic and integrated perfectly. When you have 3, you can tune around the center one. The center one is the fulcrum in a line array. So the upper one does, and often it has the highest gain setting because it's getting the least amount of reinforcement, has often the highest crossover setting because it is being asked to do upper bass into high frequency harmonics. So it's a very specific tool. The middle one gives you the mid bass attack, and as I said earlier on, the bottom one gives you that foundational structural window rattling bass.
Right. So I think in this case, right, the answer is do it, right? Because you got to get to a 6-pack. But I think our advice is know that when you buy that second pair, because most of us don't have the financial wherewithal to buy 4 or 6 subwoofers at once. Buy the second pair knowing that you're on the way to the 6-pack. Enjoy the journey.
And can be, right? You don't have to, but can be, right?
Yep.
And it's really important to us to be able to work with our customers to do that in sequence,
Yes.
right? A lot of these guys that are trying to emulate and copy what we're doing are bringing out these 6-foot-tall behemoths with 3 12s or 15s and a single amplifier, in some cases a couple of amps, but you have to spend $27,000 for your right channel and your left channel all at once. One of the premises to this is that you can work your way into it.
Slowly over
Your
time,
speakers
exactly.
may not be ready for them. When you buy your first pair of 812s or Carbon Specials, your speakers may not be good enough for anything other than a pair. But somewhere along the way, you're really fortunate, you get better speakers, like, oh my gosh, and now you can grow into it. It's not just one trick pony. You're not being asked to come out of pocket with tens of thousands of dollars at a time, and you can work your way into it. So go ahead.
Perfect. So Byron in the chat asked, or he, I guess, noted that the Serie S models use XLR inputs for the 0.1 LFE channel.
Yep.
Why don't we use XLR on all models, and why is it more found in the larger subwoofers?
So it gets expensive, right? Doing differential inputs. These are not just XLR connectors. These are true balanced differential front ends. So the cost starts to become prohibitive when you start getting into Serie TXs. You simply can't afford. It would add, you know, somewhere in the $100, $150 additional per model to that range to do that. And all of a sudden, people who could be having a wonderful experience at, say, $1,500 US, suddenly it's $1,650 for just that. What's the application? The application is when you're doing really big home theater, typically, right? And you need to run a cable 50, 60, 70 feet, you know, up into the attic, over, down, you know, comes out of the base of a wall, and you plug it in. That's a lot of lossiness. So what balanced allows you to do is you're driving a signal that's twice as loud. You've got a 6 dB, or excuse me, 50% louder. It's 6 dB louder as a signal, and it therefore suffers very long lengths, much less than a normal RCA. In a normal room, it's maybe, you know, 20 by 14 feet or something. You know, having an 18-foot cable, a 16-foot cable, is easy for any modern audio video receiver to
You're
provide.
not going to have any loss on an RCA in that situation.
Yeah. Anything else?
Perfect. There's some other questions about connecting high level and XLR 0.1 LFE at the same time, and maybe how you set that up, and if you can maybe touch on the different input options that the Serie S has.
Sure. Briefly, we've got our high-level connections in and out, which is what allows us to stack seamlessly. We also offer a stereo pair of RCA low-level inputs. And of course, we have a 0.1 LFE in low-level RCA and another 0.1 LFE out. It allows you to do everything. Basically, what the high level allows you to do is to allow a speaker that is set to full range, a good speaker, to be seamlessly blended with the REL to actually produce truly full range. Most speakers, because of their placement in the room, even very, very good speakers, often can't do much below 40 hertz real in a room. Meaningfully in a room, I should say. They may be able to measure 32 hertz or something, but at a level that's down so far,
Right.
it's
Minus
kind of
10
meaningless.
dB or something that isn't useful, right?
So what the REL connected high level coming off of your system does is it allows you to take the entire chain of custody from the source all the way out to the output terminals of the power amp and build that sound forward. If it's a big, rich, full sounding system, maybe it's a Macintosh system, you'll hear that character built forward in the RELs. The RELs will seem bigger and more effortless and heavier hitting, more impactful versus, say, a little single-ended tube amplifier, for example. Very different signature. We also then have the ability to play the LFE in as well, and we give you a separate gain control for that all the way up and down our line, right down to the T0 at 499. And why do we do that? Because theater, done the way most people do it, doesn't do what theater is supposed to do according to Ray Dolby. You're supposed to have a minimum of 5 channels, right, all the way up to, endless, right? The trin-offs that we love so much.
Yeah.
The trin-offs are 32 channels, if I recall. I think there's a variation of it that's like 35 or 36, but they're fantastic. And the whole point is to put you in a 3-dimensional holodeck. And for that to happen, for the spatial qualities to be properly reproduced, you need really full range speakers. This is the full range part. The speakers are the speaker part. And you need to be able to reproduce the extreme impacts of an LFE channel. So we give you both. We give you 2 different gain controls. We give you crossover adaptability on the high level or the low level if you're using active speakers. And we give you a dedicated 0.1 LFE, which you can set to work in harmony with your full rig. Right. Any other questions? I know we're getting to the end here.
Sure, yeah. Rob in the chat moved from S510s to carbon specials and found it completely transformational.
Yeah.
What can he expect if he makes that next step up to the reference series models?
Wow.
So it's different. It's not that you're not going to get more. It's not this just quantitative thing where the S510 to the carbon special is a big jump in terms of scale and punch and overt dynamics. When you get to the reference, they are intended for use with reference speakers, and at that level, a whole frontier of virtues becomes necessary. When you're trying to perfectly blend and support properly intonation and things on things like Wilsons that are very, very good, or Magicos or Rockports, that level of product, it's extremely important that your subwoofer be super precise, super quiet. Its pitch definition has to be perfect, and that's what you get when you step up into reference. They're a whole dive off the deep end when it comes to those things. But you're not going to go from, say, a carbon special to a number 31, what a lot of people go, okay, well, that's the next one above. You go, oh, gosh, it plays that much louder and that much bigger. That's not what it's about. It's actually...
I feel like that fineness thing I was talking about, right? And I own, reference subwoofers that I bought from you years ago when the 32s first came out, and it's fineness. It is a disappearing act. That subwoofer disappears. Yeah. When it's properly set up, it vanishes in a way that is truly spectacular.
We're going to have to wrap this up pretty quickly, I know. Let's take our last online question.
Sure, yeah. Daryl in the chat is a big fan of the Sumiko master set process, and he just wanted to know how you developed that and how do REL subs play into the master set process.
Well, first of all, it's not master set. They're two different things. It's masters, which is an acronym I developed called Modal Acoustics Simplified for Electronic Retail Specialists. It was a simplified version of a very complex set of, and it's really about making the speaker, any speaker, work optimally in any room. It's not tied to dogma. It's not directing people to do things in a specific set of ratios or any of the stuff I've heard over the years. We teach people, we teach experts to listen very, very critically and hear what the room is giving you and what it's taking away. That's the simplest way to describe what Masters does. A set is what you do at the end of it. And when you've done it and you completed it, that's your set. There's a dealer in Colorado who has conjoined the two, and it confuses a hell of a lot of people. It is not master set, it is masters, and if you do it properly, you arrive at a specific set that is very precise. The RELs became an extension of that, and we set the subs up as critically as we do the speakers. So yeah, it's a long journey. Someday I'll write a book about it or start doing, opening up public sessions or something, but I don't have the time right now. But yeah, the RELs kind of came along as part and parcel, and they were really the first subwoofers that we had found that you could do that kind of precision tuning with, and it would reward you.
Yeah, one of the things I've noticed over the years is the better you are at getting your speakers set, the easier it is to dial in the subwoofer.
Oh gosh, yeah.
So I do think in the context of this question, it's you got to have a great set first. If you want to make setting up the subwoofer as simple and easy and painless as possible, it pays to go to the mat in order to get your loudspeakers, set as well as possible. Yeah. Unfortunately, I think that we are running out of time, and so I have a few things I need to share and thank you all with. I do want to say, we have some really cool things to share with you guys because you made the time to spend with John and myself. And
thank you so much. I can't thank you enough.
This is a really big deal. We are here because of you. To say thank you, we do have an exclusive offer for you. Those of you who have been here, through this webinar, if you purchase a Serie S during our promotional period, if you've already purchased a Serie S during our promotional period, we want to make sure that you get something unique for having spent a little bit of extra time with us. So we are going to offer you a free REL t-shirt, which I think is very cool. I just picked up a couple of these for me. Yep. One size fits most, right? So we're going to offer you a large. Please come to REL. Bring us, your receipt. Let us know whether you bought it online, whether you bought it from a dealer. We don't care, right? Just thank you for being a part of our family. Please email that receipt to contact us at rel.net. Now give us your contact information, and we will send you a free t-shirt as well. I do have lawyers hanging out in the back of the room. I am required. I have a little bit of fine print, right? But you do need to purchase it during this promotion, either from rel.net or an authorized dealer, being the key. We have a website, of course, rel.net, where you can easily find who your authorized dealers are. Why do we care so much about it? It's because I care about you, because John cares about the final product. We need to make sure that we're going through those dealers so that they can take care of you.
Yeah, I can't stress that enough. I don't know, probably 85% of our business is working in partnership with dealers. I was a dealer at one time. It's so critical. This magic, this fun thing that we all love so much, can't happen without good dealers. And what are good dealers? Good dealers are, of course, dealers that have all the right, the right philosophies and the right instincts to help a customer in need. Our job is to train those dealers to be better. Right, we have a huge body of knowledge that we've developed in this specific narrow focus, and we want to pass those things along both to you, but also to the dealers, and that helps you have a better experience in the store.
I cannot stress enough what John just said. I come from the world of retail. I learned from John and from others because I had the opportunity to be in a retail space. Yeah. That being said, I understand that depending upon where you live in the country or your system at home, you might want to buy from us directly, and we respect that as well. If you go to rel.net in order to make a purchase directly, please use the promo code Serie S Webinar T. That's TEE, right? And you put that in the website, you're going to be able to get a free t-shirt right there. You don't have to send in anything else. It makes it really easy. The last thing that I want to re-emphasize is thank you for joining us. If you had a question that we didn't have an opportunity to address here because we have so many questions in such limited time, please send those unanswered questions to contactus@rel.net. John has already alluded to, we're going to work really hard to have all of the questions that you send to that based on this webinar answered in the next handful of days. So just because we didn't get to your question on air doesn't mean that we don't want to take advantage of you being here and having this moment with us. Please email us that question at contactus@rel.net. I'm really thankful for this opportunity to spend time with you, John, in front of the group.
Fun stuff, but I just want to echo, and then I'll be quiet, that we are so grateful for you letting us do what we love to do, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. It means the world to me personally. You know, you are the lifeblood of REL. Let's be really clear, and so I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. This is really wonderful to be able to share this. Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. It was a pleasure.
And stick around for a minute because we have a beautiful little photo montage of some very cool systems to follow.